Joining us now is Harry Lambert, our special correspondent and editor at the Daily Beast, breaking down the hot topic with an even hotter subject, Luigi Mangione, the alleged killer of the UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Harry, for listeners not up to speed on this story, can you just give them a quick thumbnail of what actually happened and why a nation was gripped?
For those not refreshing their Daily Beast feed every 3 seconds, the way that I am, to find out more.
If you somehow missed this whole thing.
Yeah.
Wednesday, December 4th, 6:45 a.m., a UnitedHealthcare CEO is gunned down by an unknown assailant who shoots him in the back, somehow then manages to escape completely undiscovered into Central Park and out of New York for 5 days. At the time, I was at the Deal Book Summit in New York, about 6 blocks away. And there was a kind of ripple through the audience as we found out about this. And we actually had a healthcare CEO on stage who knew the guy who died and spoke about it almost without feeling. I was like, you know this guy and he's just been shot. And that kind of presaged the whole way we all started speaking about this thing, which was the guy who was shot, he was forgotten in our consciousness, I think almost immediately. And now we've got to the point where we've discovered who the killer is, Luigi Mangione, found apprehended in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And
in a McDonald's, correct?
Mm-hmm. In a McDonald's, having gone to a Starbucks, anti-capitalist criticism at its finest. And the crucial clues in this whole thing, again, if you haven't encountered any of it before, is that at one point he takes down his mask in the hostel he's staying at shortly before the killing, because he's got to speak to the woman behind the desk, who I think is kind of an unheralded hero here, right? If she hadn't charmed this guy in some way, then we would never have got a face of him. But he also had these distinctive eyebrows. Very
distinctive eyebrows. I thought I'd seen those eyebrows walking around Central Park on their own, actually. But you're right, the woman at the hostel, I mean, the reports were that she was flirting with him and she said, oh, come on, pull down your mask. And he pulled down his mask, at which point the security cameras caught full face, basically, with his cap on, which was the thing that actually led him to be apprehended at the McDonald's in Altoona.
And there's a former cop that's made a really good point, which is he was in a bit of a bind at that point, because if he refuses to pull down his mask, then he starts seeming like a strange individual. And then she maybe starts getting intrigued by who this guy is who's staying with her. So he kind of had to pull down his mask. But then the eyebrows, I think, was maybe the biggest giveaway, because when he's at McDonald's, he's captured while wearing a mask. And so was it the eyebrows that gave him away, these big, thick, bushy things, which in an otherwise pretty finely featured face?
What I loved was the detail of him going to McDonald's and ordering hash browns, because he obviously wanted comfort food after he'd been on the run for 5 days.
Totally. I mean, I think the funny thing about this story is it's all very easy to be glib about, and we can get into how the internet has been, and I'm sure we have been too. Watch the actual clip of him shooting the guy yesterday. And after you watch him actually gun him down, it's hard to find it funny anymore, and it's strange that we managed to.
Well, it was an explosion of support, because the assumption was that he was a Robin Hood type character who'd gone after healthcare, which, you know, we know that medical debt is the single biggest reason for personal bankruptcy in America. There is no love for these companies, which is absolutely, obviously, no excuse to murder someone. But there was less sympathy than there would have been were it a teacher, for example.
Yeah, and also it's a rich white guy. And, I mean, is that relevant? What do you think?
Well, I'm assuming when you were at Deal Book, I mean, I suddenly became conscious of the sort of the new phrase EP, executive protection. I'm assuming that was part of the conversation at Deal Book.
Totally. I mean, but even then, it's hard to, if there's a madman who wants to kill you at 6:45 a.m. on a Manhattan street corner, I think that's very hard for anyone to anticipate. I mean, that's the terror of being in this kind of position of power, right? But I think,
and he wasn't a well-known executive either. He wasn't like one of these billionaires that takes a stand, like someone like Bill Ackman, for example. He was a very low-key, had a low profile, lived in the Midwest. So for him to be shot on the street in New York at that time in the morning with 10 days, what looks like 10 days premeditation, seems pretty remarkable.
Well, the other thing to say is we haven't got into the motive of the whole thing. So to explain that,
well, tell us about Luigi. Tell us about his background and why we think he did this.
So Luigi's the son of a sort of Baltimore dynasty set up by his grandfather. Big Italian-American family. Very bright kid, valedictorian, went to Gilman, high-end private school in the state, goes on to the University of Pennsylvania.
Ivy League college.
Absolutely. He's a coder, sets up a video game development club. is a sort of earnest and interested individual in all his online postings for a long period of time, until he suddenly goes dark on Twitter in the spring of 2023. And he doesn't reappear for 9 months. And when he does reappear online, within a week, he's recommending on his Goodreads the Unabomber's Manifesto and saying it's impossible not to see that most of these predictions about the way we would turn out were right. And he does say, interestingly, given what he goes on to do, that the Unabomber was rightfully imprisoned and there was no excuse for what he did. But you can already see there the glimmers of some sort of development in his thinking.
That would be alarming as a parent, Sam, if one of your kids posted that.
Well, I think more alarming is that I would not be in contact with my children for a period of, 6 months? And he was not really in contact with his family all that much.
So he comes back at the start of the year online and then he's tweeting. And then it's only in the last few months of this year that he goes basically dark. But
Right.
his life had started to kind of spiral a little bit. He'd been a coder for a few years at a company called TrueCar. He lost his job in 2023. Throughout all this time, he's had a back injury, a degenerative back condition since he was young. And it gets a lot worse in early 2022. He has some sort of surfing accident. He tries to manage it conservatively for about 18 months. Then he has surgery during this period where he's offline. Initially, he thinks it's going to go well. It then doesn't go well. And I think that becomes a source of a lot of frustration. But it's not just that it was his back and that he was therefore motivated because he'd lost his health insurance or what have you. It was a wider social critique, which is why I think the Unabomber thing is crucial to the whole thing.
But did he lose his insurance? Because at 26, you come off your parents' plan.
That still hasn't been confirmed. I mean, that's one theory, right, that's going around, but we still don't know that for sure.
But to what extent is this actually an attack on the health care in this country, or in fact a schizoid break in a very distressed young man who needed more support than he in fact got?
I think it's both of those things, but we know from the short manifesto that he wrote that he said what would be better than to kill one of the CEO at his own bean counting conference, as he put it. Mm-hmm. So, and he says again in that manifesto, we're one of the most expensive countries in the world for healthcare, but we're something like 42nd in life expectancy. So there are all these confused ideas like meshing together in why he did this.
So the other thing that's fascinating about this story, obviously, is the response online. And in a weird way, I think coming off the Menendez brothers, there's another sort of Robin Hood folklore myth that's grown up around this guy. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, what do you guys think about it? I mean, why do you think that happened?
I have such complicated feelings going into this because I think it's a horrible story. It's really awful. Violence is never the answer. Has it provoked a conversation, like a long-needed conversation about people being denied medical coverage, which is the depths that healthcare companies will go to are just bottomless. They're just awful, and people are victimized by them. They are catapulted into bankruptcy for things that in other Western countries, like cancer will not bankrupt you in Canada, will not end you don't have to sell your home to cover your cancer care in other developed nations. It's just unheard of and impossible to imagine. I'm not a person who finds the murder amusing in the least, and actually it has been a really weird, kind of bifurcated my brain a little bit, how people have found it so amusing and seen him as a Robin Hood figure is actually kind of astonishing to me. As a former comedian, I guess, I used to get asked a lot what my red lines were. They were like, how do you know when you've gone too far? And I'm like, well, I know that I don't make jokes about someone getting gunned down in the streets of Manhattan. I really don't. I do think it's funny that he went and ate a bunch of hash browns. There's elements to the story that are silly and fun. And I do think that there is a huge conversation to be had about healthcare in this country. Do I think that this is going to answer any of the very critical problems that we are facing here? I actually don't. I want to be a person who would hope that all of this conversation would lead to something. I'm too cynical for that. And I do think that one unspoken element of this to be perfectly honest, is that he's a really attractive young man. And so that's actually a part of why I think it has exploded, is because there are, like photos of his abs that are really like captivating to people.
Well, he does have extraordinary abs.
One of my friends said I'll be writing letters to him in Rikers.
Yeah, I did. I was like, how many marriage proposals is he going to get when
Right.
he is finally sent to prison?
We all love a story of a man on the run, right? It's just the original crime that's abhorrent.
Well, we love a story of a man on the run. The manhunt is fascinating. And also, I do think in a weird way, these stories are sort of galvanizing in terms of people craving community. So what you get is people going online with their own theories, people talking about it with their own theories. And it's a shared narrative that we have fewer of as social media is fragmented, what we all talk about together. Right. We don't watch television at the same time anymore. All that sort of water cooler conversation has collapsed. You can watch television when you want to watch it. We're not watching Bad Sisters, my current favourite show at the moment, at the same time. I don't have enough people to discuss it with, because people will go, no, don't tell me, I haven't watched it. Whereas in the, and I don't want to romanticize the old days, but that sense of, oh my God, did you see that episode? And it becomes something you can coalesce around. And we saw it with the election, we saw it with the submersible. And it's always more interesting.
God,
right? Do you remember the submersible where you were like,
Yes.
are they alive? Are they not alive?
Yes.
And there are so few stories that galvanize us like that, that this was one of those stories. Plus the fact it was interesting that he slipped the bonds of the NYPD pretty quickly. And then the brilliance, actually, of the ability to pull all the CCTV clips together and track his movements. I mean, it's fascinating.
There
to
is
me.
something so sad and basic about the fact that he pulled down his mask in order to flirt. And that was the thing.
Human weakness.
Was the thing.
But don't you think that's
human
kind of
weakness.
Like
I mean, incredible.
It's those small moments, right? There's The Day of
Yeah.
the Jackal, that book. I remember reading it when I was a kid, and
Yeah.
the whole thing hangs on the fact that the killer misinterprets that the politician he's trying to kill is going to kiss twice on the cheeks rather than once.
Right.
Because of the difference in cultural norms.
Well, which is now on television with Eddie
Right.
Redmayne as
Yeah.
an incredibly successful series.
Exactly. And then obviously Trump just tilts his head at the last moment, like all these tiny inches that decide things.
It is like, I do feel, I don't know if I'm right about this, but I do feel like the story is changing as we learn more, as people are reading, more information is coming out. I feel like he's going to eventually be less of a Robin Hood figure and kind of more of a tragic, like, it seems.
I think the key thing is watching you got to watch him. I didn't initially want to watch it. You don't want to watch someone being killed. But it's only once you watch it that you no longer think this is a joke in any way. The other thing I think, why has it captured our imagination? What did Trump famously say? I could gun down someone on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose any votes. In other words, that's the most extraordinary crime you could commit, is basically what he was saying. The idea, like, it's the most public thing you could do.
I do hope that, like, when the dust settles and when, it feels even glib to say when the dust settles, but I guess that's the expression that I'm using. I do hope that the conversations about healthcare can continue. I hope that can change. I want that to change, even though cynically I don't think that this is quite the catalyst, but I hope that something comes out of
But
it.
wouldn't that be bad in some way? Because then what we'd be saying is, oh, Luigi, you've managed to successfully change the conversation by
Everything
killing
about
someone.
it is bad. Every single thing about it is so, so bad.
I think one of the other things that galvanized people was the fact that he left a trail of clues, and we became a nation of detectives, and we were tracking it on social media in real time, which is not usually what happens with a crime, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right, and also there's an interesting media angle on all this. So some people noted that the New York Times had 26 people contribute to their main story on Luigi when we all found out who he was on Monday night.
26 reporters.
I think it was 4 reporters, 19 contributing reporters, and 3 researchers.
I think that might be the size of the Daily Beast's entire newsroom, and we managed to do this with a much smaller crew.
I think we put our stories out first, but anyway. The other thing to say is
you got that in there.
Yeah.
You got that in there.
We did. Shout out to Hugh Doherty, our executive editor, for leading a really good effort around this.
And this is the strange thing about a story like this. You can put 26 reporters onto it, but Twitter has, a rapidly declining base of 250 million users. So that was actually the place where you could find stuff. And obviously the tricky thing was you'd see a thing and it wouldn't be sourced and you wouldn't know about it. But a lot of the stuff that did well actually turned out to be true ahead of time. Like some random person had spoken to someone
I do
knew
think
him.
it's good that the book that the book that he had inscribed what is the title of the book?
Delay,
Delay, deny,
deny.
depose, or 3 D words.
It's delay, deny, defend, but he made it delay, deny, depose.
Okay. Well, it's good that book is it's top of the charts. Feels like
It's
a book we
top
should
of the
be.
charts now?
Feels like a book maybe we should all be
Should have had the
reading.
author on. What's Harry Lambert doing here?
That's what I'm asking.
Oh boy.
Harry,
Next
thank
week.
you for filling us in. So he got arrested. Well, he got arrested as he was taken into court. He was shouting something. We don't quite know what he was shouting other than it insults the intelligence of the American people.
Yeah, as if he was framed, or as if there's these other strange things that have come out where he said that things have been planted on him. Cash had been planted on him.
Again, it's seeming to go down a sadder and sadder path, not so much a Robin Hood path, but more of a mental illness path.
I don't understand how this Robin Hood thing started. He wasn't robbing anyone. He's just gunning someone down in the street.
I think Ryan Murphy is online to the prison cell where he's being held right now, trying to sign up the life rights.
When this first happened, and it was really breaking for me on the Daily Beast website, to be honest, I was like, this is, not only is the newsroom at the Daily Beast right now, I was like, this story checks every box. But also I was like, Ryan Murphy has got to be. He's already written the script. He's casting.
There's echoes of Andrew Cunanan here. He did that. Do you remember this? Who
course.
gunned down Gianni Versace and became? I think he launched the idea of a spree killer, and he was eventually found on a boat. But it's that sort of crucial moment of 5 days feels like the perfect attention span for America to stay fully glued. I think that was actually the time of the submersible being down there.
boy.
Right, that broke over a week. That keeps everybody gripped, and then suddenly I felt like this morning everybody woke up and we were like, okay, next. What's on to the next?
Like, it is not okay to gun people down in the streets.
And
really not.
Josh Shapiro came up and said that on his press conference. I mean, that's the other angle on this, that, Shapiro was making his bid for the 2028.
I thought he did a pretty good job, actually. It was
Presidency,
moving
yeah.
speech, it was sober, and you could absolutely see 2028 flashing in his eyes.
Yeah, you don't get what you want by being a lawless society.
So no purge for you.
No, thank you. I will not be participating in the purge.
Harry. Harry, thank you very much for filling us in.